G'day. Here's some more stuff that come across my desk. I'll go to a couple of videos shortly to prove the point. But I want to begin with a couple of Bible verses just for a perspective, a biblical perspective on the way the Australian government and Australian corporations are treating the people of the Commonwealth of Australia. But this video will primarily be about the dangers of having your house digitally and wirelessly connected to the system. That function primarily takes place through the IoT, the Internet of Things, which is one reason why there was such a big push to upgrade from 4G to 5G, because the 4G network couldn't handle the level of connection that is necessary for the government and corporate AI systems to automate the control of the IoT connected devices. IoT being the Internet of Things. That's something you need to look into if you don't understand what's going on there. And it allows, at this point, as you will see from the videos, it allows the very thing that I've been trying to warn people about since I started making public posts or comments or speeches about the whole digital identity system and the digitisation of our lives wholesale, back as far, I could see it incoming back as far as, 2020. I definitely had the research to prove it by 2021. Unfortunately, it would take me ages to go and dig up all those files. A lot of that stuff, or at least some of it, is put up on my Telegram page, Vaccine Facts and Updates. So you can see in real time how I was sharing that information. But most of it is contained in my record of screenshots and documents. I'd love to go into this deeper, but I will skim across the surface. No doubt this will come up again. There's a lot of this sort of stuff that comes across my desk. So as a result, this stuff will definitely come up again, and hopefully I will be able to find some of the older data that I've pulled up just to show you what I'm saying, that I'm not just going, I told you so, or trying to big note myself or any of that sort of stuff. But this stuff, to anyone, I'm not anything special. I just do the research and I try and understand what I read and see from that research in the light of a biblical understanding and context and framework of how the Bible reveals things will be in the last days. And also I use basic critical thinking and logical projection to understand what these things could be used for and how they would fit into the biblical scenario of the last days, which leads me oftentimes to hit the nail right on the head. And I've been carrying the burden of that for many years because so many people still won't listen and they won't do anything about it. And I'm just watching my country be slowly torn to pieces. And the people that I love and care about be corrupted and deceived and enslaved and destroyed because they can't or they won't grasp the truth of what they are seeing before their very eyes. And that's one reason that I'm so broken at this point. think a lot of people feel that way, who've actually been trying to warn each other and their families and their friends and the general population of the Commonwealth of Australia. The people of this land have been trying to warn them for years now about what's really happening to this country and who's behind it and why they're doing it. I mean, people come to that with all different levels of understanding, but there's been a lot of truth go forth by a lot of people, and it's cost a lot of people a lot in their lives, which no one seems to really consider or care about. And yet, still, the majority of people are just not paying any sort of attention or trying to at least do their own research to verify what's being told to them by people who are speaking out against the mainstream and government narratives. And that is heartbreaking. That will crush you, man, after a while. The more you see, the more you can see, and the more you are watching the destruction of your own nation. And not just us, but everywhere around the world, mate. Everyone is afflicted by this stuff. Every nation on the earth is afflicted by this stuff. It's a global agenda. There's plenty of proof of that. I'll give one example coming up in one of the videos. I'll show you that this is not an isolated case in Australia, but every advanced Western country is actually feeling the effects of this. And just to show you from a biblical perspective how unrighteous this all is, how evil this whole agenda is, and how corrupt the men are who are perpetrating it, I just want to read you a couple of things that the Word of God says about the poor, because you find that the oppression of the poor is a mark of men who are heading and leading their nations straight into the judgment of God. It's always been that way. The history of the world reveals it. The history of the Holy Scriptures reveal it. It's not something that can be easily denied or ignored if you have an eye to look and research and read even just history, mate. And the history of the Bible in particular, the history of man that's encapsulated in that book, because it will give you God's perspective on it, and a moral and spiritual, a righteous, just, holy and true spiritual perspective on things at the same time. So if you can't see things critically for yourself, the Bible will point out the critical problems with the way people behave themselves toward each other and the way they behave themselves toward God. That's one reason why people don't like that book. So let's start here and then I'll go to the videos. But the 7th year, so I'm just going to read excerpts. This is just from a word search in my Bible, King James Bible, using the term the poor. And so there's a law here recorded in Exodus 23. This is a law that came directly from God, and was how the people of Israel and those that put themselves under the law were to deal with the poor. You find there's a lot of laws about the poor in the Word of God. And that's relevant today because Australia is becoming poorer and poorer even as we speak. Most families are on a knife edge at this point financially. And I'm talking about what were previously comfortable middle-class families. The burden and the whip of the taskmasters has increased and increased since the COVID-19 debacle. And now economically, people are just going under, continually going under. Small businesses, medium-sized businesses, individuals who are from the middle class side of society and anyone below that, and even some of the bigwigs are going under. But mostly it's aimed at the middle class, which has the opportunity, and the small or medium-sized business owners who actually have an opportunity through those means to become at least semi-independent people that don't need the help of the system. Right now they're bringing you to a place where you're crying out to the government to help you, and that's exactly what a collectivist, democratic socialist ideology and system will bring to you. It's the welfare state. Right? They don't want independent people. They want you all part of the collective that's all saying the same thing, all doing the same things, all thinking the same way, and all taking some form of handout from the government, big or small, in order for you to maintain your lifestyles. And if you can't see that happening in Australia today, well then, and it has been happening over the last 50 to 70 years quite easily, it's been progressively brought in through that period of time and has now well and truly entrenched itself as part of our daily lives, the welfare state, which is also at this point the surveillance state and the enslavement state. Because as soon as you become beholden to the government, you become their slaves. And as we've seen, the government does not treat its slaves very well, which is contrary. Its whole purpose is to make you poorer and more dependent on government handouts and government subsidies and government rebates and all of that stuff, to the point where you can't function without the government actually paying your way, either partially or wholly. You can't function within the system, and at that point you are fully enslaved, especially when they will then layer the digital identity and digital currency access into that, and your status within the digital identity system will actually be the determinating factor as to whether you are eligible for government assistance or not. And without government assistance, they are making people so poor that they can't seem to find another way to keep going and maintaining their lifestyles. But this is what the Lord says about how to treat the poor. But the 7th year thou shalt let it rest and lie still. This is talking about your land. So every 7 years you're supposed to rest your land and let it lie still, that the poor of thy people may eat. And what they leave, the beasts of the field shall eat. In like manner shalt thou deal with thy vineyard and thy olive yard. So under the Lord's way of doing things and his ideal of justice and equity and good government, there was a commandment for people to rest the land every 7 years, and whatever grows of itself during that time, the poor were to come in and take that, and whatever they left, the beasts of the field would be allowed to come through and eat what's left. So right there is an actual every 7 years the poor get a boost in their ability to gather in food for themselves. And again, so I'm just going through, I'm not going to go to the actual verses, this is just a list of all the word search, searching for the word the poor. Again, he reiterates it in Leviticus about the land. Thou shalt not glean, and this is talking about your harvest. So this isn't just every 7 years, this is every harvest. Thou shalt not glean thy vineyard, nor shalt thou gather every grape of thy vineyard. Thou shalt leave them for the poor and stranger. I am the Lord your God. Right, so this is a direct commandment of God, and it shows that he actually has an eye to look after the poor, and it is the responsibility of the people who have more, the individuals, not the government. This was to individuals. If you had a vineyard, you were supposed to not glean that. So whatever falls to the ground and whatever is left behind by the harvest, you don't send more people through to pick all that up. You leave that, and the poor are allowed to come in and glean and gather up food for themselves and their families. That's the Lord's way of doing things, and that was the responsibility of every individual. Every landholder was given that responsibility toward his fellow man. So you cut the government right out of the picture. This is something specifically between God and men. Let's go here. Deuteronomy 15:11, for the poor shall never cease out of the land. So you'll always have the poor. Jesus Christ himself said that you have the poor with you always, but me ye have not always. For the poor, and he was talking about his bodily physical presence on the earth at that time as their Redeemer, and through his earthly ministry to reveal himself as such and actually do the work of redemption on behalf of mankind, which was to die and to be buried and to rise again. So he says the poor will never cease out of the land, so they're always going to be with you. Therefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt open thine hand wide unto thy brother, to the poor and to the needy in thy land. So there's a direct commandment by God saying the poor are always there, therefore those who have enough are to open their hand to their brother. So once again, it is a community-based thing. It's a exchange between individuals, not between a governance or commercial system, but a direct interaction between individuals in the sight of God by his commandment. Open thy hand wide unto thy brother, to the poor and to the needy in thy land. How many people are doing that these days? Not through some monetary fund or some charity or some foundation or some committee, but actually individually in their own communities, finding the people who are poor and needy and actually helping them out. Right, if we were actually helping each other out that way, we wouldn't need half of the government apparatus that is currently at the top of our food chain and is sucking all the wealth out of the lower levels of that food chain. Right, you could get rid of at least half of that. The welfare state would pretty much crumble if people observed that one commandment amongst themselves as individuals toward their neighbours. And you see as it goes on, that they didn't do those things. Psalm 10, the wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor, let them be taken in the devices which they have imagined. Again, he sitteth in the lurking places of the villages, in the secret places doth he murder the innocent, and his eyes are privily set against the poor. And again, he lieth in wait secretly as a lion in his den. See, subterfuge and corruption, right? They don't do these things overtly. They do it through clandestine and subterfugal ways within the government and within their own lives. He lieth in wait secretly as a lion in his den. He lieth in wait to catch the poor. He doth catch the poor when he draweth him into his net. Again, Psalm 12:5. For the oppression of the poor, for the sighing of the needy, now will I arise, saith the Lord. I will put him in safety from him that puffeth at him. And again, ye have shamed the counsel of the poor, because the Lord is his refuge. Right, so at some point God is actually going to stand up on behalf of the poor against the wicked who are doing these things to him, and is going to put him in safety, whereas the wicked will be brought down low. Again, the wicked have drawn out the sword and have bent the bow to cast down the poor and needy, and to slay such as be of upright conversation. So these people are contrary to the word of God. Instead of looking after the poor and the needy of the land, they're actually slaying them and using them and capitalizing on them and destroying them for their own benefit, for their own gain. I'll see if I can find something in the prophets for you. I mean, there's plenty in Proverbs too. The poor is hated even of his own neighbour, but the rich man hath many friends. So you see why people gravitate toward rich people, and why people want to become rich, because it means they'll be popular. That's a big thing about humanistic materialism. Jeremiah, there's quite a bit, and Jeremiah is actually the condition of the nation right up at the time when God brings his four sword judgments upon them, which in the last days equates to the opening of the first four seals of the book of Revelation. Also in thy skirts is found the blood of the souls of the poor innocents. I have not found it by secret search, but upon all these. Behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom, And you see how God judged Sodom. He rained fire out of heaven upon them. Pride. This is what led to their wickedness and their gross sexual immorality. Pride, fullness of bread, and the abundance of idleness was in her and her daughters, the other cities around about her. Neither did she strengthen the poor and needy. Right? So we've got the same attitude here in our society today. What do you think is going to happen to this nation? And it goes on. You can do the search for yourself. At this point, I will go on to the videos that I wanted to show you. So this is what happens when your government is rampantly out of control. This is the end result of, and you'll see that in one of these videos he even says it. This is the end result of people complying to corporate and government agendas. Your compliance, your consent is needed for them to do this to you, and people are consenting and complying. They just don't resist. They won't say no. And as a result, this is happening now, and this is the very stuff that I warned about. Now, this has to do specifically with wireless access to devices within your house and wireless access to your whole electricity network through the smart meter that is connected to most homes at this point in Australia. If you don't have a smart meter on your home, praise God for that. You need to keep it that way, otherwise this is going to happen to you. And you will have to fight the corporation that's trying to install the smart meter, and you will probably have to fight some level of government legislation, supposed legislation. But at this point, they only talk about policy, and if you did any research on what a mandate is, what during COVID, and the legality of a mandate, you find that it falls in the same class of what they call grey letter or soft letter law, non-legislated law, but that is only part of policy or regulation within an institution, corporate or government. A mandate, a policy, a regulation, they're all the same thing, right? They are not actually even statute law or legislative law. They are what they call grey letter law or soft law. You can actually, if you go and Google grey letter law or soft law, you'll get some very interesting documents, white paper documents that explain that, and also some analysis of how that was used during COVID-19 to make people think that they had to legally comply with the mandates. That was one of the biggest lies that I found during that period of time when I went and actually read some of these documents on soft law and grey letter law and how it was being used in Australia and what its legal standing is. That was one reason why they had to pay back so many mandate fines, both in Victoria and now in New South Wales, because there was no legal teeth behind what they were doing. There was no legal grounds upon which they could enforce those things. They were simply government policy, government regulations, government mandates, and private corporate regulation, policy and mandate. And a lot of what you're having to put up with, including this situation right here that I'm going to get into, is basically the same thing. It's a policy, and it turns purely off consumer consent. Right? There's an offer. They even say this on this mainstream stuff, right? They even now say what I've been saying for ages, man, wherever I can. I've been telling people the way that the whole commercial governance system works is that it works off your consent. Right? You have to consent your way into these things. If you resist and you actually hold your ground, you will find that you have a legal right not to consent and not to allow these people to actually come in and invade your very daily lives and control every facet of your daily existence, which is what they are ultimately trying to achieve. And it's already happening. I mean, this is insane, this stuff, but this is the very stuff that I've been trying to warn people about. This is a result of allowing energy companies to actually put a smart meter on your home, which then has the ability to not only monitor, but also directly control which appliances and for how long and in what way those appliances are being used directly through the home electrical circuit and the home Wi-Fi system. That's what smart meters do. I mean, I'll put it to you this way. If you're growing weed inside and you've got a smart meter connected to your home, the people who are monitoring that smart meter and the AI algorithms that are looking for certain things in your power consumption will know that you are growing weed, mate, because the profile, your power profile will indicate that. I mean, even the fact that you have to have it on for a certain period of time and off for a certain period of time, and that happens regularly every day, like all that stuff is being recorded and analysed by an AI system. Right, so that's a sort of invasion of privacy that even on that level, and this goes way beyond that, what they're doing here. So I first found this, you'll see here 3 weeks ago I saved this because I thought this would be coming up, and it was something that I'd actually been talking to people about and trying to warn people about, and I thought, oh, here it is, look at this now. So this is the first report from 9 News, and their reaction.
Power companies might one day be able to control the temperature of the air conditioner inside our homes as part of measures to combat high demand and low supply. Live now to Today reporter Sarah Stewart in Parramatta. Sarah, this will face a lot of opposition.
So this is how they broke it to the people. This was the initial seeding of this into the mainstream consciousness, because most people don't bother to research or listen to anything other than mainstream news. So this is how they're breaking it to the sheep, to the masses, the ignorant, and I must say at this point, willfully ignorant masses.
Yeah, it certainly will, Jane. Imagine coming home from work or school, it's been 40 degrees outside, you're hot and flustered, you go home, the house has been closed up, it's all hot and stuffy, and you think, okay, I'm going to turn on the air conditioner to a cool 19 or 20 degrees to cool down the house. But guess what? You can't. The air conditioner is being set to a predetermined temperature, being controlled by a third party. This is the idea that has been floated by an associate professor at Monash University, saying it could become normal, it could become accepted that they would control your air conditioner, your hot water system, and even your pool pumps, obviously.
So for anyone who knows anything about Monash University, that is a hotbed of radical ideologies and globalist elite agendas, together with the Sydney University, University of Wollongong, and the list goes on, ANU, right? But these are the places where a lot of this stuff is actually fomented, and the ideology and the planning of it is thought out before it's implemented into society is straight out of your universities. Those ones in particular, Monash, Wollongong, Sydney, ANU. Can you believe that? So this is something that Australians are supposed to accept as a possible reality. Well, this is just predictive programming, because if they're saying this stuff at this point, it's actually going to happen. So this was 3 weeks ago.
Very controversial, and independent Daly MP Daly isn't having a bar of it.
There's no way that government can intervene in our lives to that level. Honestly, can you imagine Australians that are saying somebody else controlling my air conditioning from afar and not having me controlling it?
But you've already got a smart meter connected to your house, and there's no way they can do it. There's no way they should do it, right? Because that's not good government. And our constitution says that the government is supposed to govern for peace and order and good government. Go and look up what the word good means, right? I'm not talking about some relativistic view of good or bad. It's not relative, mate. Good is good and bad is bad, right? Go and look it up in a dictionary, a decent dictionary. So what they are doing here is actually directly against our constitution, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, 1901 and 1900, where the bill and the Constitution was passed through the British Parliament. Look at that document. Right, so there's a direct breach of constitutional law by the government, because this is not good government.
I think especially when we're paying so much money for electricity at the moment, people are going to say they should be in control of their own remotes. And Jane, there's been a lot of talk.
Yeah, exactly. How much has electricity gone up over the last 3 years? I remember back, and the excuse is always the environment and the climate. I'll take you back to about 2009, 2010, or it may have been as late as 2012. But our power bill at that point, when they made a push for the environment and all this, a globalised push to reduce carbon emissions and all of this crap that they go on with the environmental stuff, energy bill went up by 60% overnight. Right, and that was because of supposed government environmental tariffs that were being passed on to the consumer by the energy companies. And that has only got worse, and more and more of that has been heaped on at regular increments and regular intervals up until the present day. Especially over the last couple of years again, with again the big push for environment. The big excuse to make people poorer and poorer, right? And not even be able to access what we've actually taken for granted as one of the necessities of our current lifestyle in what used to be, a first world Western country, but is now starting to look, I was saying it years ago, welcome to third world Australia, when they started this stuff, mate, before I even knew any of this stuff. What was going on years and years ago in society, I was starting to say to people, welcome to third world Australia, because even then, without knowing what I know now, I could see clearly that the policies the government was implementing was only going to make Australian people poorer and have less access to services. And now look what's happening.
this morning about the correct temperature. So I think the only way they're going to be able to sell this is by saying it's a marriage saver or a fight stopper, a way to, take away the temperature. It's in someone else's hands.
That is a good idea. Maybe they should get like divorce lawyers or relationship therapists onto this theory, and they can be the ones who control the temperature. Yeah. Also, whether there's the doona on the bed or whether we need to. Look, we're opening a can of worms.
Separate beds, guys.
Separate doonas.
I hate it enough when the hotels control the temperature.
Freezing.
When you want it down, if you come in after and you're all hot and you want it 20 degrees flat.
No, 22.
No, 22's hot.
I like a good 19.
Yeah, I'm in the teens.
It's a little bit on the cool.
Yeah,
I wish I was still in the teens.
You're paying a lot more for your air conditioning than I'm paying for mine. If yours is on 19 and mine's on 22, I'm saving money.
See?
Just ask Effie Zahos. I got my tips from her.
I'm smashing my solar because we're in Australia.
Anyway, I didn't even want to tell you what my temperature is.
Danica's building a nuclear power plant.
She's in a bunker.
How Nine News ends their report that through the Australian government policies, which have now been adopted by the power supply corporations, they've adopted the government policies as part of their own corporate policies as well. Obviously, to keep getting the incentives and handouts from the government that help increase their profit margins every year and be compliant with their internal hierarchy and their mates within the government. Right. After revealing that, they are now, according to those policies, going to be able to remotely set the temperature of your air conditioner, and that was only a bit of a porky pie, because it reaches in deeper than that, much deeper than that. So Nine News' response was to try and laugh it all off. So they end the clip by laughing. Yeah, real funny. Real funny. Now you're actually going to have someone controlling the temperature in your home. The more smart devices you've got in your home, the more you will actually be afflicted by this. The dumber your home is, and the more you rely on old school ways of heating, cooling and cooking and things that don't work wirelessly and are not connected. The best thing you can do is have your own private power grid at this point. Not a connected solar grid, but your own offline grid. I would recommend that to anyone at this point, to invest in that, because otherwise you will suffer. You will suffer at the hands of these wicked and evil and greedy men. Right, so that was the Nine News report from 3 weeks ago. This is the Sky News report.
Well, it's not luck and it's not gambling. It's a skill set that anyone can learn who is willing.
Well, joining us now is Nationals MP Keith Pitt. Keith, great to see you. Now, I'm getting very, very confused because we're being told we can't use our dishwashers, we can't use our washing machines, and all of this is being done to prevent blackouts, yet I thought renewable energy was going to...
Told by who? Who is telling us that we can't do the basic things that are necessary for the routines of our daily lives? Who is telling us this? Who is forcing this on us? How is this even a discussion in a democratic, supposedly first world nation, Western nation, that was founded on Christian principles, and indeed was actually founded on gospel preaching and the King James Bible? Right, if you go back to the very beginning.
Give us this great nirvana, this utopia of endless, cheap, affordable energy. So what am I missing here? What's the missing link? Could it be a bloke called Chris Bowen?
Well, there's definitely a bloke called Chris Bowen, but he's not partial blackout, he is all blackout. And when we're talking about these things, it's called demand management. And unfortunately, back in 2014, it was also a coalition position.
So this has been sitting in the ranks of government, this concept of demand management for renewable energies has been sitting in the government since 2014 at least, and it would have been bred in some university. The concept of it would have come out of some university or some institute that advises the government, right?
As opposed to it for a couple of reasons. The first one is when your air conditioner won't work because it's been selectively turned off.
Notice it was the coalition. This guy personally was opposed to it, but obviously he was a coalition member, that being Nationals and Liberal Party being the coalition, right? So it's coming from both sides of government, like most of these agendas are, because they're not Australian agendas. They're not for good government within the Commonwealth of Australia. They're not for peace and order within the Commonwealth of Australia. They're actually compliance with overseas, international and globalist, what's the word that I'm looking for? I always forget this word. And this is a word that they used, obligations. So I actually heard a minister trying to justify the misinformation and disinformation bill, say that they were doing these things in compliance with international obligations. So now you've actually got international policy that you have no say over as an Australian, as a person of the Commonwealth of Australia. You now have that international policy by people you don't even have a say to, or have a say who is actually amongst these people that are making up these global agendas and policies, right? This is coming completely from outside your governmental jurisdiction, and is now forcing its way into your very home. And it doesn't matter which side of politics you're on, left or right, they have international obligations which are not in the interests of the people of Australia, certainly not for good government over the people of Australia.
Or your electric stove, or your hot water system, or anything else that uses a lot of energy, guess who it impacts? Voters. And I think that's a problem. And secondly, the idea that someone can reach into your household and decide what appliance you can turn on and off, and also control your solar, mind you, to curtail that at times when you don't need it, which is pretty much when it's operational.
Right. So if your solar system is connected to the grid, they can also control that. And now people are scamming people with that. You now have to pay for your panels, which they gave you subsidies. They gave you subsidies years ago to put those panels up, and now they're recouping the cost of it and making profit off you by making you pay per panel for having those panels connected to the grid system. And you could only get the subsidy for a grid-connected solar system. If you wanted to set up a freestanding solar system, there was no subsidy offered to you. What a scam, mate. What an absolute scam. How are we so dumb that we fall for this stuff, right? Can't people think critically? Is it always just about making the instant buck and having the instant win? Right, good, put solar on your house, but don't connect it to the grid. Why? Why? Now you're paying for it. Now you're actually paying for it. What seemed like a good deal to start with, the government, once again, how many times is this going to have to happen? The government has just pulled the rug out from under you. And will only end up making you poorer thereby.
Well, guess who else could do that? Well, potentially China, or someone who doesn't have a great interest in our country, in fact, are not our friends.
So it's an
You've got all of these.
Actually connected to international corporations, your grid system, your solar, the appliances in your house are now connected to overseas international corporations, which, as he says, may not have any direct interest in the people of the Commonwealth of Australia and their good. Right? And the government can say, oh, we're not doing it, it's the company that's doing it. But they're only doing it because of government policy and because they are getting money from the government to comply with those policies.
Impacts which can occur because there's an IT connection into every single household. I just think it's mad. Why don't we just have cheap, affordable, reliable energy that people can turn the switch on and use it when they want to?
Yeah.
Well, Keith, you are an electrician by trade. Before you got into politics, you were the local Sparky. What's it like does the average person out there, the people who would have been your customers in the past, do they really understand the degree to which Labor are destroying the energy supplies into their homes, into their households, into the future?
Well, they know what's on their power bill. They know it didn't go down by $275. It's gone up. And they know that they've been trying their hearts out. A lot of them have put solar on the roof because they can't afford to pay their bill. Some of them do it because it makes them feel good, and that's great. But the reality is coming back now. There's lots of places where it's curtailed. There's lots of places where solar's not allowed to be connected because of its impact on the network, particularly in very densely populated areas. And they all know that this is happening to them. They can't really understand it because the connection's not been made. It is a direct connection to the policies of the Labor government, and it's going to get worse.
Rita?
Well, I'm interested in this news report that we had from Nine Media in recent days saying that perhaps power companies in the future can control our air conditioning. So you can't set the air conditioner at the level you want it. They might say 21 is the absolute minimum you can set your temperature to. That's something that is being seriously discussed, and it's bloody frightening. I do wonder whether Australians will back something like that, whether they can be convinced that it's for the greater good to allow electricity companies to dictate that to households.
They told you taking a deadly experimental injection as a response to COVID-19 was for the greater good, and that the people who weren't doing that were actually enemies of the collective. They were the enemies of the collective of society, and were enemies of the greater good because they wouldn't take an experimental, deadly medical intervention during COVID-19. And that experimental, deadly medical intervention turned out to be more deadly than COVID-19 itself. That is what the evidence has actually shown since 2023, when the data from their global experiments started coming back in and was accessed by people who were willing to put it out into the mainstream media and also into mainstream social media, and appraise people of the truth of the situation. And there's been enough of that even come out over mainstream media that no one should be ignorant of that fact, that injection actually is still causing the death of a lot more people than what they attributed to COVID-19. And the injuries from that are far more wide-reaching and devastating than the actual aftermath of having COVID-19. Yeah. Wow.
Well, Rita, I think the first place to start is Canberra. Let's take all the air conditioning out of all the public service buildings and let's see how it goes from there. Or potentially we turn it off when it's not sunny. I just think this is mad. Every Australian has the right, in fact, they're entitled to have a reliable energy supply they can afford. And for even those that can afford to run their air conditioners much lower, well, good luck to them. If they can afford it, that's great. But the idea that Big Brother can reach into your household and determine what your air conditioner will be set at, whether you can cook a chicken or not, whether you're allowed to put your clothes dry.
At a time, I have to go to the last one. So this is what actually happened 13 hours ago, this report.
Do you feel like your digital life has become just life?
Check this out, from 13 hours ago. So the worry was that
more than 8,000 Queensland households
and set your aircon at a certain temperature and you couldn't adjust it remotely, but that was only a smoke screen. This is what they really did.
Householders had the cooling function on their air conditioner turned off, not by them but remotely by their electricity supply. More than 8,000 Queensland householders had the cooling function on their air conditioner turned off, not by them but remotely by their electricity supply Energex, and it happened on a sweltering Sunday earlier this month. And this was the 5th time this Big Brother style intervention had happened this year. Once you allow your energy supplier to fit a digital meter to your electricity box, they are in control. What was it the Borg used to say? Resistance is futile. They can remotely turn off part or more than 8,000 Queensland householders had the cooling function on their air conditioner turned off, not by them but remotely by their electricity supply Energex, and it happened on a sweltering Sunday earlier this month. And this was the 5th time this Big Brother style intervention had happened this year. Once you allow your energy supplier to fit a digital meter to your electricity box, they are in control. What was it the Borg used to say? Resistance is futile. They can remotely turn off part or all of the electricity being fed into your house. Look, Will, how sinister is this? I mean, what they do is they come along and say, we've got this better electricity meter, it will save you money, and we'll give you a special discount of $400. Can we install it? I think we should say no.
I think you're looking at the wrong source of evil. I don't think this is the fault of the energy company.
Right, this guy is a plant. But what he actually does is reveal that this whole system is contractual. Right, he's trying to cover for him, but in doing so, he actually reveals in his own words that this whole system is contractual. That is, it operates off your consent, the consumer's consent.
Fact is, there's not enough energy to go around in Queensland, and there's not enough to go around in Australia. We have governments that are going all in on renewables without the large-scale battery storage to be able to actually do it, and there is not enough energy for Energex to go around. So it's either that or large, wide-scale blackouts. I don't see what else they can possibly do here. The issue is government policy. The issue is still suicidal net zero, and unfortunately, the private sector has been compromised as a result.
But we're still giving people outside our house the power to control our house. And even though you're right, the rest of the background, everything that you said is perfectly correct. We're not going to have enough power in the system, and it's not going to come at the right times because we're not getting dispatchable power. Despite all of that, we can't give in to this kind of control.
So my understanding is they signed up for an energy rebate, and I think you get about $400 off if you choose to put this in. So
that's the sales pitch.
But as long as they know what they're signing up for, and I don't know how well this was communicated, it could have been very
our house. And even though you're right, the rest of the background, everything that you said is perfectly correct. We're not going to have enough power in the system, and it's not going to come at the right times because we're not getting dispatchable power. Despite all of that, we can't give in to this kind of control.
So my understanding is they signed up for an energy rebate, and I think you get about $400 off if you choose to put this in. So
that's the sales pitch.
But as long as they know what they're signing up for, and I don't know how well this was communicated, it could have been very dodgy on the energy company's part. I'm not sure. If they knew what they were signing up for, then I say, buyer beware.
I think this is a really good lesson in why precedent is so important, and I harp on about this all the time. But I look back at COVID, for example. I'm not going to really press on that, but some of the legislation that was used to enact these draconian measures and arbitrary laws was enacted in Australian legislation. There was some in 1956. In New South Wales, it was 2010, and it was only being used in decade later. And so this is such an important lesson in why precedent matters, because you might think, it's, the difference between analog and digital, like who cares? But you're right, Kel, there is a precedent that we act, unfortunately, because of what history shows, particularly with big government, is that they take far easier than they give back, and big governments continue to grow until there's a revolution against them. You can vote your way into tyranny, unfortunately, but you have to fight your way out of it. So precedent is so important. And I hate that we have to look at these things, but when you are signing over these things, we should be using a lot of discernment and a lot of wisdom and go, how could this be used against me and my family in the future? And it's sad that we live in a first world nation and we have to think this way, but I think that we do. And I think the first thing Australians also need to stop saying is that we're a first world nation. I mean, what makes a first world country a first world? You have power, you have electricity, you have comforts. You don't just have necessities. You have.
We're going in the wrong direction, because we're not going to have dispatchable power under this, wind plus solar plus battery.
Right. But she nailed it. She nailed it right there.